I'm pleased to present the next paper proposed by Vincent Grosjean, my fellow colleague at INRS. Vincent could not attend this conference due to a health problem. His topic of interest is connected to a new model of companies that is proposed in France by the law. This new model concerns enterprises that want to do their part to face environmental but also societal challenges that are characteristics of the current period, namely climate change, environmental degradation, to name only a few. This research is focused on the potential impacts for health and safety of this new model, more precisely on psychosocial dimension and psychosocial risks related to this model of enterprises. The plan we will follow is built around 5 points. First of all, I will say a few words to present the French model of enterprise named entreprise à mission, or mission-based enterprise, or company, or purpose-based companies. Then I'll present the question of interest for our research network. What are the potential consequences of health and safety for enterprises that decide to adopt this frame? The third point is the preliminary question that will be addressed today. So before even interviewing employees, what can we say to structure the analysis of health and safety in this context? Is there an a priori categorization that helps to structure the analysis and should be taken into account for any further investigation? In 4, I present the results of this preliminary investigation and then the conclusion and the next step of the research. So first of all, let me explain what we call in French the mission-based company. This model was proposed by the Ecological and Economical Ministry of France in 2019 for companies that have somehow the purpose to face ecological and social challenges. 2 ways of coping with these challenges are possible or seem to be. One is to have a very precise list of duties that every company should face. It could precise, for instance, levels of reduction of carbon dioxide, waste management practices, to take into account the necessary transition of the economical world as well as the societal one to reduce climate change and negative impact of companies on the environment. The other one, chosen by France, is for the company itself to specify what its main objective is and to what extent this objective is compatible with tackling with these environmental problems. The French legislator has therefore proposed a list of conditions for the company to define how it will contribute to the necessary changes. The first one is that the company must define its global purpose. In French, the word used for global purpose is raison d'être, for the reason for being. And this purpose should take into account the interest not only of the shareholders, but of all their stakeholders, including the global society, the clients, the consumers, but also the employees. And so, for INRS and institutes like ours, it's interesting to underline this characteristic, meaning that employees are concerned by the definition of the reason for being of their enterprise. A second point is that this global purpose should be declined into a list of objectives that the company decides to pursue. So the global purpose and the list of objectives are designed by the company itself in a process of consultation, ideally of its stakeholders. Furthermore, the list of general objectives should then be declined every year in a list of more operational ones. The dual duty must be monitored, supervised, and controlled by 2 bodies. The first one is an internal internally chosen board of control, which is called in France mission committee. It helps the company director to evaluate on a regular basis to what point his or her ambitions are correctly followed. The second body, an external one, is an independent third-party board that should assess every 2 years the extent to which the objectives are actually being achieved. If we look at the evolution over the last 3 years, the number of mission-based companies has risen from a few hundreds 2 years ago to over 1,000 today. Most of these companies are small businesses, but the number of large companies that have adopted this model is proportionally greater than their share of the French business demographic. And most of them are from the tertiary sector. Several very known enterprises at the international level can be cited, like Danone or the French Post Office, as a simple example, as large company. A legitimate question could be put to our PEROSH network: are there any possible links with health and safety issues? To what extent is an institute like INRS concerned about these changing business opportunities? In France, there's a great deal of discussion around the question of meaning at work, but also around the ethical dilemma faced by companies, for instance, by employees who are particularly aware of the climate change challenges. Some people might feel distressed by the lack of coherence between, on the one hand, what they see of the evolution of the earth, the climate and animal diversity, for example, but also the increasing scarcity of resources, and on the other hand, what their work requires them to do. With regard to the short-term interest of companies in attracting young people and, for example, other specific categories of workers, they could decide to adopt a proactive attitude to the value that many people in the general population have in relation to these challenges. We consider that two contrasting hypotheses should nevertheless be explored regarding the effect on health and security and safety of working for those type of companies. The positive one is that it gives workers greater meaning in their work and also provides them perhaps with a management style which is more delegative, participative, more oriented toward the participation of each worker in local decision insofar as the overall objective of the company could be considered as a possible compass for deciding what to do in many specific situations. In the opposite, the fact that the company has chosen such a model of organization could lead to an increased level of conflictuality between two categories of people: people who want the company to do as much as possible with regard to this new set of objectives, and other people who remained convinced by the old way of doing things with the sole compass of making profits. A second hypothesis, negative, could therefore be an increase in the level of conflict in this type of company. Even more so, it would be possible that people attracted by the official message of the company which has adopted this model are deceived, because they find that the real practice, actual day-to-day practice, is not in line with this discourse, for instance. This could lead to disappointment. It could be experienced as a breach in the psychological contract between the company and the worker who has been attracted by the company's official statement, the moral value it claims to promote. So before going any further into the study of how people are living, how they perceive their level of well-being in this type of companies, we have decided to focus on a preliminary question: Do we have any clues for categorizing these companies? Do we have any idea of the possible ethical alignment of some of these companies with the overall purpose that might motivate some people to contribute to a world that is more socially and more ecologically coherent in comparison with their own values? We consider this question as preliminary to get inside the difficulties encountered by workers in these companies. The method used to carry out this categorization was threefold. Firstly, we conducted interviews with experts from various fields, people who hold a high-level management position in one of these companies, or people who were involved in designing the reason for being, overall purpose, and operational objectives of these companies. We also interviewed people with a specific position regarding the adoption of the new legislative possibility, as well as consultants, helping companies to move to a different type of management, of consultation, to develop the overall purpose and list of objectives. Then we conducted analysis on a subsample of 50 companies' official discourse, precising their global purpose, reason for being, and goals. We examined whether a demarcation line could distinguish the different categories of purpose of the different categories of goals that these companies put forward. And then the third source of investigation is national experts' reports, a report for the Ministry of Economy that is done every year about the changing landscape for this type of company, but also reports from the community of mission-based companies, and they are interested, of course, in the impact of this model of enterprise on management practice. We are using the Theory U methodology proposed by Professor Otto Scharmer of MIT to get insight on the basis of this huge amount of data in order to construct a possible categorization of company, and it's led us to 3 axes of categorization. The first axis would make it possible to distinguish between different companies who are mission native. Most of them have been created with the new law, and they came into force. They were built from scratch around an environmental or social main purpose, and they have declined from scratch their main goal and their main objective. We can consider that they are designed by construction to fulfill a mission, and that they do not therefore need to move from less ethical practices to new, more ethical ones. We decided to place in a similar category certain companies that already existed before the new law, but whose main product or main services is something that has been described as impact-driven. A second axis of differentiation that was proposed by certain national reports consists of distinguish companies whose core business is really defined by the purpose, by the reason for being. For instance, Open Classroom is a company that defines its core business as training people, and it is also its mission to give people skills that they could use professionally. At the opposite, a company whose purpose is devoted to only 10% of its production, and the rest of the company continues to operate as before, business as usual, does not mean the conditions. This leads to a third axis of categorization corresponding to the weight of rentability-driven goals that could counterbalance or work in the opposite direction to environmental and social goals, and leads to the question of the company's economic model. For instance, in France, we have a large number of companies that are cooperatives or based on mutual construction that have adopted a mutual economic model in which the pressure, economic pressure is less important. So some experts have concluded that a great proportion of the 1,000 mission-based enterprises should be placed on the second alternative that we propose. They restrain their ambitions to something that is not built around a response to environmental challenge. The reason for being is not per se a reason for being, it's more a kind of niche of virtuous behavior that will not transform the logic at hand. So we could anticipate that there will not be a real and deep evolution of the meaning of at work for the employees, not a great change in the way people experience their relations to work, but of course we should proceed interviewing workers to know more. Nevertheless, during the preliminary stage of our research, we also heard some very positive testimonials, which made us want to find out more about employees' experiences. This is the case, for example, of a mutual bank that carried out in-depth and participative reflection to define its reason for being, and it now concentrates on loans of people on low incomes in order to finance the insulation of their poorly insulated homes. And this context of change is potentially a source of pride for employees and could lead to a positive transformation in the relationship with customer, with a role that is more positive and educational than purely economic. So, Vincent has provided links to articles in English in different notions developed in this presentation. It will be perhaps difficult for me to answer your questions, but you could ask Vincent, and you'll have his email if you want to contact him. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Agnès. Thank you.